joining me tonight is former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Danny Ayalon. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
And also Dr. Oleana Bagno, research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies. Good evening. So, what are the chances that they will say hello face to face?
Well, the cordiality here is not what's at stake. I mean, they may say hello to each other, but a meaningful meeting probably will not take place. And I must tell you, Lucy, that the U.S. and the West is in quite a disadvantage. The loss of Crimea is a fait accompli. Now the battle is whether to keep eastern Ukraine as integral part of Ukraine. There is not much. There are not many tools for the Americans and Europeans vis-à-vis Russia, as they are still the main supplier of natural gas and energy to Europe, and there's no appetite whatsoever in these Western democracies for any kind of a conflict. So I think what they're trying to do is more pay lip service, maybe some very hard declarations, but very, very few steps, if any, on the ground.
Let's try to talk ego-wise. Who has the bigger ego, Vladimir Putin or President Barack Obama?
Well, I think that ego-wise, Putin will win any competition with any leader of the modern world. But it's not about ego, it's also about rational, and Putin is a very rational man. So I would probably not agree to the point that Russia has the real plans to annex eastern Ukraine regions, because it's not interested in these territories per se, as it was interested in the Crimea. So there's going to be an interesting battle of egos, but I do not see that Putin is going to be as proactive as he was with the Crimean situation.
So if Russia is not interested in these areas, what is Russia's interest?
Well, I believe first and foremost, Russia is interested in the global energy markets. And I think this is where the U.S. and the West can hit it hard, but not in the short term, because it will take quite some time, 5 years and longer, to have substitute for Russian energy to Europe and other places. But certainly they can be limited in terms of drilling in international waters or in areas where other countries have the jurisdiction and the sovereignty. But Russia, basically, the main interest is to come back to become a superpower on par, at least, with the United States.
So the United States is noticing the, let's say, this step that Russia wants to get in. And can the United States allow this to happen, to become a superpower, that Russia will become a superpower and a new rival?
If we are within the superpower rhetoric, we should assume that there's going to be a bipolar world back again. And this is not going to happen because Russia lacks economic resources. But it has a strategic potential in terms of its nuclear weapons potential. And it also adopted the rhetoric, at least, of the not the Cold War, but the rising power, and it has something to offer to the West, its own unique way. So Russians are definitely trying to, at least to play the superpower status.
So if they're trying to play them, let's put Russia in the equation. Russia is doing exactly what the United States is not doing. Russia is trying to solve the problem in Syria. Russia is helping Egypt. Russia is dealing with Iran and trying to be like a compromiser. Russia is doing every single thing that the United States, in a way, is failing. So what should be the United States' next step? Because, let's say, foreign affairs-wise, this is not sending a good message outside.
Well, the U.S. can easily draw a line in the sand and stop the Russian, let's say, at least diplomatic expansion. It's all about perception. And let's make no mistake about it. Russia, and it was alluded here, is no match to the United States. Not technologically, not strategically, not militarily, not economically. But it's not just a matter of capabilities, Lucy. It's a matter of will. And it seems like that the United States, under the leadership of Obama, has lost the will for world leadership. whether it's a moral leadership, whether it's political leadership. We saw it in Syria, we saw it in Iran with a 5+1, and even in the Ukraine, that in Crimea, short of a few rhetorical rebukes, there was nothing really done.
What is standing behind this, let's say, peaceful agenda, peaceful try to, we don't want to get into a fight, we don't want to anger the world, we want peace to try and achieve things in a peaceful way. But we are living in the same world, and we know that sometimes you need to put your both legs on the ground and you put your hands on the table and say, that's it, this is the limit. How come the United States is, what, trying to achieve another Nobel Prize?
Well, we have to remember, Lucy, that President Obama was elected twice on ending the wars in Iraq, ending the wars in Afghanistan, and on very ambitious domestic agenda with the immigration reform, of course, the healthcare reform, tax reform, everything else. So in order to really concentrate on the domestic agenda, he has to limit the, let's say, the sources and resources for foreign policy. And by that, I think it is quite clear, and I think this is what President Putin is gambling on, that Obama does not have the wherewithal to be back and stopping him on the international agenda, and he is pushing the limits as much as he can. I agree, he will not go now, he doesn't need to go to East Ukraine, but this is also on the table. Crimea is lost. And so they are starting the new game from an advantage for the United States. It's a matter of will, not just, an advantage for Russia. But last thing I want to say, Lucy, is that the United States and Europe still need Russia for any kind of peaceful resolution in Syria and in Iran. So you see, they are really in a bind. And they have kind of maneuvered themselves into a corner which Mr. Putin very well is taking advantage of.
Mr. Putin is taking advantage of the current situation.
Absolutely, and I completely agree to the point that unlike President Obama, Mr. Putin is only conditionally democratically elected leader, and he doesn't have to take into account the interest of his population, so he can allow himself and his country to get into further sanctions. So these sanctions, these personal sanctions, are not a real leverage or the policies of Mr. Putin.
So if we want to examine, let's say, Putin's next step, because if the United States is trying to start from scratch right now, in this way or another, or trying to change the rules of the game, what should be Russia's next move?
Well, as Mr. Putin suggested, he's open to the dialogue, and he's open to the dialogue also with Mr. Poroshenko, the newly elected.
What does he mean open to a dialogue? Because we know that he can say that he's open to a dialogue, but he is basically doing whatever he wants, in a way or another.
Well, in a way, the United States allow him to do what he wants, and as Daniel precisely, he already stated that the West is limited in its capabilities of influencing Mr. Putin because of the energy dependency.
Not even by sanctions?
But the sanctions, again, if you think about these sanctions, we're all talking about them, but these are 98 people who are personally targeted by these sanctions in 147 million country and 20 companies. So this is the scope of the sanctions. We talk about sanctions more than these sanctions are actually influencing, at least at the moment, the population of Russia and Mr. Putin. Of course, there are wishful thinking and talks that it might bring some kind of an internal collapse, especially Ukrainians. They are liking to think about or discuss these opportunities, but, this is not the real sanctions that would change Mr. Putin's opinion.
See, theoretically, effective sanctions would have been stopping buying Russian energy. This would have brought the Russian economy to a halt, but they cannot do it. That's the problem. They cannot do it in the short run. Now, Putin is a real strategist. What does he do? Now he is aligning himself with China in a big energy deal, and I believe this would be the next move to look at the real nexus now between China and Russia vis-a-vis the U.S. and the West. And I could see Putin and Russia supporting China vis-a-vis the islands which are under dispute with Japan. This could be another blow to the U.S. if the Russians move against Japan, and I'm not sure that the U.S. has an answer for that.
The United States knows that right now Putin is, let's say, doing a new deal with China. We know that China is an economic force that is rising just in front of the United States. How come the United States is allowing this to happen?
Again, because it seems like under the leadership of Obama, there is a withdrawal from international scene, more focus on the national and the domestic issues. And when it comes to the international, there is only reaction. There is no proaction. And I think that Mr. Obama, President Obama, was really stung when he tried to make an initiative. The only major initiative in international relations was his Cairo speech in 2009, when he tried to restart also relations with the Muslim and the Arab world. And then again, with the Arab tumult and revolution, it all kind of exploded in his face. So right now, I don't see any appetite in Washington for moving out. So in the case of Russia and the Ukraine, the only thing they can do is give real support to the Baltic states, to Poland, to Ukraine, to the Czech Republic, maybe add some troops, some NATO troops over there, maybe some American Navy in the Black Sea, things like that. Beyond that, I do not see much.
So what should be Ukraine's next step? If they're seeing that basically the United States is, for the first time maybe, is put into a corner, what should Ukraine do?
Well, Ukrainians have to, they are not the real actors in this game, and they do have to adjust themselves to the circumstances. They do realize that Ukrainian economy is even more dependent on Russia than the Western economies, and they will have to maneuver between the Western aspirations of the population and the real needs of the economy, which is tightly bound to the Russian economy. But there is one point that I wanted to note. Putin has a favorite philosopher, Mr. Dugin, and Mr. Dugin once aired an idea that Russia is going to be the new leader of the non-liberal world, which constitutes about 95% of the world population. So if we think about the power struggle, at least in the mind of Russian current leadership, then they are playing the game that they are leading the world, which is not bounded by the liberal values. And Mr. Obama, and this is one of his probably limitations, he is a really liberal and democratic leader who has a value system which is not matched to the value system of Mr.
Obama needs to go for a show of the Rolling Stones, for example, in Tel Aviv. Oleana Bagno, thank you very much.
We have to wait for the midterm elections in November to see what's the
Maybe
move.
we'll go to the Rolling Stones. Ambassador Daniela, thank you very much for this. We're going out for a small break. 2 minutes.